After decades on the run, one of Italy's most wanted men is arrested in Bolivia. Rome dispatches Secret Service agents to pick up former communist Cesare Battisti, sought on murder charges. We'll cross to Rome for the latest shortly. France prepares to kick off national town hall debates on taxes and green energy. The government's plan to get yellow vest protesters around the negotiating table after tens of thousands took to the streets again yesterday. And a new home for Rahaf Al-Qanoun. The 18-year-old Saudi arrives in Canada, having been granted asylum there, following her online pleas for safety. Good evening, and thanks for joining us this hour here in the France 24 newsroom. I'm Nadia Massi. Our top story for you. Italian Secret Service agents are today en route to Bolivia to pick up one of the country's most wanted men. Cesare Battisti, an Italian national, is wanted on 4 murder charges in the country, committed allegedly during the 1970s. Battisti spent 30 years on the run in Mexico, in France, and primarily in Brazil, under the protection of the former leftist president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. But when Jair Bolsonaro took office on the 1st of January this year, the far-right president pledged to send him back to Italy. Now that prompted Battisti to flee to Bolivia, where he has been detained today. Cole Stangler takes a look for us then at his life on the run.
March 2007. Sitting in the back of a black police car, Cesare Battisti has just been arrested in Rio de Janeiro. He'll spend the next 4 years in jail and is set free in 2011 after left-wing President Luiz Inácio da Silva refused to extradite him to Italy and granted him the status of political refugee. The legal troubles didn't end there for the 64-year-old former communist militant. In March 2015, Battisti was arrested again before being freed, and last month the Brazilian Supreme Court ordered his arrest and extradition, arguing his crimes were not political. A life on the run that began in the late 70s. Battisti was then a member of the Armed Proletarians for Communism, a revolutionary group that called for armed uprising. He's accused of murdering 4 people, including a prison guard and policeman. The militant denies the charges, saying he never shot anyone. Sentenced to 12 years of prison by an Italian judge in 1981, he first fled to France, where President François Mitterrand promised asylum for political refugees who renounced violence. Battisti was later sentenced in absentia to life in prison. He spent the following 15 years between France and Mexico, publishing several crime novels and leading a relatively calm life as a building superintendent in Paris. But in 2004, a new extradition demand was approved by a Paris court, and the militant ran again, this time to Brazil. The country's new far-right president, Jair Bolsonaro, had vowed he would immediately extradite Battisti upon taking office.
Covering this story for us today is our Rome correspondent Josephine McKenna, and she joins me now. Josephine, what happens next? Will Battisti be directly extradited to Italy now?
Well, it seems there is a bit of confusion. The Italian government says it has dispatched an aircraft directly to Bolivia. It's not clear to me whether he has to make a stop in Brazil or will be brought directly back to Italy from Bolivia. Having said that, this has all the elements of a Hollywood thriller. That arrest that took place in Bolivia was the result of some very intense investigations by Interpol and Italian investigators who tracked him down on the streets of Bolivia, really after tracking his telephones, up to 15 telephones and tablets and computers, and finally ascertained his identity before Bolivian police, with the support of Italian investigators, arrested him. He was unarmed at the time. He didn't put up any sort of resistance, and apparently spoke Portuguese at the time of his arrest. But certainly a coup for the Italian investigators and the Interpol team that was working on this investigation, who tracked him down just a month after he went on the run there in Brazil.
And how's the government, where you are in Rome, been reacting to the arrest of a man that Italy's wanted for such a long time?
Well, we've seen some very strong reactions. President Sergio Mattarella welcomed his arrest and said it was time for him to serve his sentence. He's been found guilty of 4 murders in Italy and has not served that time. And Matteo Salvini, the hardline interior minister who is an ally of the new president Bolsonaro, was quick to say the party is over, it's time for justice to be served. And he posted tweeted an unusual caricature of Battisti dressed casually with his sunglasses, sitting in a deck chair on the beach, saying the party is over. But Mr. Salvini also used this as an opportunity to attack the left-leaning leaders, dating back to President Mitterrand in France and President Lula in Brazil, who had over the years offered protection to Battisti. And so Salvini is using this as a way to vanquish the left and say it's time for this criminal to serve his time in Italy. And this is indeed, according to him, a victory for far-right leading leaders. So strong reactions from Italy. We're certainly expected to see more. We've seen reactions from the Prime Minister as well. But certainly a strong reaction from the Interior Minister, who is almost claiming this as his own victory as he waits to see Battisti brought back to Italian soil.
Josephine, thank you very much indeed. Josephine McKenna there talking to us from Rome this hour on the programme. Next then, let's bring you an update on the Yellow Vest demonstrations held here in France yesterday. 84,000 people marched nationwide in what was the 9th consecutive week of protests. The demonstrations largely peaceful, although police did fire water cannon and tear gas to contain people near the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Many of those on the streets were calling on President Emmanuel Macron to resign. And the government is responding by launching a series of national debates which kick off this Tuesday in town halls across France. Well, ahead of those sit-downs, Selina Sykes takes a look for us at where the Yellow Vest movement is now.
2018 may be over, but the Yellow Vest movement has come back with force in 2019. Across France, demonstrators were determined to show that they would not back down on their demands. Around 84,000 people took to the streets on Saturday, more than the 50,000 that protested last week.
Last week we were already here and there were a lot of us. That's significant. But now it's even more so. I think the government has to realize that it's not going to go away. Something has to be done. There's too much of a gap between the richest and the poorest. It's not sustainable.
Signs with the letters RIC, Citizens Initiative Referendum, are a common sight during protests. Holding a popular vote on government policy proposals is one of the Yellow Vests' main demands. Many are also calling for Emmanuel Macron's resignation.
I'm asking Macron to make an effort and resign, because we're starving in a country of promises. My message is clear.
For the Yellow Vests, Macron's 3-month national debate in 13 regions across France starting on Tuesday is not enough. Negotiating with the Yellow Vests has proved difficult for the government. Starting as a social media campaign that's quickly morphed into a movement powerful enough to force Macron into his biggest U-turn so far. The Yellow Vests have no official leaders or representatives. The violence seen since demonstrations began in mid-November has shocked many and could discredit the movement. Several journalists were targeted in Paris, Rouen and Toulouse during the 9th round of protests.
Well, meanwhile, President Macron has paid tribute to the 2 firefighters who died while responding to a suspected gas leak in central Paris yesterday. A Spanish woman holidaying with her husband was also killed, as was a 4th person who hasn't yet been named. Now, their body was discovered in the rubble today near the site. Over 40 people have been injured in what was a huge blast on Saturday morning in the shopping neighbourhood of Grand Boulevard in the centre of Paris. Next, Israel says it's discovered a tunnel dug by Hezbollah from Lebanon into the country. According to the Israeli army, the tunnel started in a Lebanese village 800 metres from the border and was one of 6 recently uncovered. The Israeli government has accused Hezbollah of plotting to sneak across the frontier and carry out attacks. Well, Israel has also long been concerned that Hezbollah can receive weapons from Iran via Syria. On Friday night, Syrian state media said Israeli missiles targeted a site near the capital, Damascus. And in a rare public statement issued today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed those strikes.
Only in the last 36 hours did the Air Force attack Iranian warehouses with Iranian weapons at Damascus International Airport. The backlog of recent attacks proves that we are more determined than ever to act against Iran in Syria, just as we promised.
Next, an 18-year-old Saudi woman who picked up a massive following online after tweeting that she feared death in Saudi Arabia has now arrived in Canada after being granted asylum there. Rahaf Al-Qanoun took to Twitter when trapped at a Bangkok airport hotel after she renounced Islam and fled the country. Within hours, the hashtag #SaveRahaf was trending on Twitter, and the United Nations took on her case, culminating in Canada's decision to accept her.
Touching down in a safe haven after fleeing her home country.
This is Rahaf Al-Qanoun, a very brave new Canadian. She's a very brave young woman who's been through a lot.
The 18-year-old arrived in Toronto after fleeing Saudi Arabia. She alleges she was abused by her family and, after renouncing Islam, faces prosecution if she returns to the kingdom. Canada accepted to grant her asylum.
Canada was glad that we were able to act quickly and to offer refuge.
The case is likely to further strain relations between Saudi Arabia and Canada, following a falling out over human rights issues last August. Riyadh expelled the Canadian ambassador and severed all trade and investment ties with Ottawa. Al-Qanoun's story made headlines across the world. She was stopped at Bangkok airport last Saturday en route to Australia, as she didn't meet the requirements for a Thai visa. After being threatened with deportation, the 18-year-old barricaded herself in an airport hotel room and took to social media to draw attention to her case. Thai authorities handed her into the care of UNHCR, who helped with her asylum claim. Al-Qanoun's case turns a spotlight on human rights abuse in the kingdom. Her plight recalls the cases of other Saudi women who have fled mistreatment, only to be forcibly returned to the kingdom and never heard from again.
Let's go to Senegal now for you on the programme to follow the country's famous boat race. There's no cash prize for the winner of the Saint Louis Regatta, just pride, as the event is rooted in the history of the city, as Ivana Scatola now explains.
An impressive demonstration of pure strength. Practicing for the big day, these fishermen turned rowers give it all they have. The Saint Louis Regatta is a tradition that dates back to the early 19th century. The event is rooted in the history of the city, which was once the African capital of colonial France. At its origin is the rivalry between the town's fishermen. Once a year, life in Gendar, the district the race is held in, is put on hold. And the day before the race, it's all anyone can talk about. Kutai Nyang will be leading one of the teams.
This day is like the city's Father's Day, a day to celebrate our ancestors. Everyone loves it. No one has any time to work because we're all concentrated on the competition.
There are 3 different teams. There's no reward for the winners, but the honour is enough. Finally, the day is here. Levels of excitement are at an all-time high as crowds gather to wave the rowers off.
What's important is winning. Give it everything you've got.
Before stepping into the boat, rowers must wash themselves with this mysterious liquid. Concocted by the holy men, it's meant to protect them from the evil eye. Now, it's race time. It's a grueling test of strength. 3 kilometres there and back. One part involves capsizing their own boats and climbing back in as quickly as possible. It's neck and neck right to the last moment. But Kutai's team win with a photo finish. Back at the shore, he's welcomed like a hero. Tired but happy, tomorrow he'll return to his day job.
With those celebrations from Senegal, we leave it here for this bulletin. Thanks for watching and stay with us on the channel.